All right, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lou Bryson. Plus this week with special guest John McKee of Headframe Spirits, who I will let your host give a more formal introduction to in just a moment. Before we get started, I want to tell you a few different ways you can interact with your hosts and their guests throughout the show today. So to your right, you'll see a chat window. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from. At the bottom of your screen, there's an Ask a Question button. That is the best way to, as you may have guessed, ask a question. So just enter a question in there. I'll be keeping an eye out for those and sending them over to your host throughout the presentation. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes that easy. But with all that said, Marty, Liz, Lou, the show is yours.
Thank you, Will. You're a puppet, a pauper, a pirate, a poet, a pawn, and a king. Just so you know that. And our producer.
And the producer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Duffy. I'm a former defrocked senior master of whiskey for Diageo, about 14 years of that, nothing big. And then 2 glorious years as the national brand ambassador for Benedictine, Franche Lacroix. 8 years as the co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo. And for the last 6 years, probably the 6 happiest years of my life, as the sole North American brand representative for Glencairn Cristal. Yes.
Oh my God. It doesn't have anything in it yet.
Nothing yet.
No substitute.
Oh, yeah, that's right. If it doesn't have that on the bottom, which is kind of Glencairn, if you can read it.
Yeah, you can't really see it.
It's from a little country called China. So throw it out. Made from compressed dogs. That's why I understand. So, anyways, Lizard.
Excellent. I will gladly take it.
What about you, Liz?
Thanks everyone for joining. Really excited. We've got a super awesome guest on today. So John, thanks for joining. Really excited to get into conversation and some whiskey. So thank you for that. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have just over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage, spanning across a couple different products. So beer, rum, vodka. But my particular specialty and favorite is whiskey. I spent most of my career at Diageo, but now am currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what that's about and what I'm doing, if you want to scroll to the About the Host section, there's actually a little link to my website. So check that out. And over to Lou.
Thank you, Liz. I'm Lou Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer, a whiskey liker and drinker. But I like her of whiskey.
I like the liquor.
I make a living writing about whiskey. My latest book is Whiskey Masterclass.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
yay. I love you, John. I love you.
Page 261, John. 261.
I'm also currently a senior drink writer for the Daily Beast. Just had a piece go up yesterday about Goza, which is a really weird beer that I don't particularly care for, but I pray for its soul. So, yeah, for what that's worth. I would tell you what I'm drinking today, but I can't do that because I'm not drinking anything yet because that's up to John. So,
John.
Let's roll here.
Yeah. Well, all right, then. On that note, rather than introducing myself, let's start with some whiskey, and then I'll introduce myself.
Oh, all right.
So,
you just took the ball right on my card. Did you see that? You just took the.
That's what I do.
Balled you.
Oh, you didn't send me the book, so
By the way,
my way, right?
John is planning on turning this into a lot of craters created by F-bombs. So just a warning for any children watching this.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Out. John's just going to fuck.
See, right there, right? Now watch me not say it the whole time, just so that
probably
that went on Duffy, right? So, all right. So here's what we're gonna do: is we're gonna go open our bottle, and then we're gonna drink some, and then I'll introduce myself. And I want to say I'm grateful to my friend Liz for drinking a little bit on the show. I've heard that this isn't something she normally does on the show.
She does not do that.
I feel very, there's a big hurt.
There's no video of Liz ever drinking.
No.
I did my yoga pre-show, so I'm ready.
So cheers to you guys, and I'll start talking about my miserable self in just a sec. So then we'll talk about the booze later. I'm really grateful to be here. I really love this industry, and I love the people that I get to hang out with in this industry. There's some people already pinging in on the side. There's this guy named Eric K who pinged in. That guy has one of the best rums you're ever going to see in your days, and he's been to Butte, America. So that's on you guys now to start coming to Butte, America. But for now, cheers, and I'll introduce myself. Yeah.
Virtual cheers.
Virtual cheers. Cheers and couches.
And cat.
So thank you for that, guys. So yes, my name's John McKee. These guys were really cool to me because I said I don't do podcasts unless I get to drink. And they said, okay, send us bottles too. So I did. I co-founded and co-own a distillery or two in Montana with my wife, Courtney. I used to do biodiesel way back in the day. Invented a way to distill biodiesel. Is actually our largest facility is just west of Chicago. Does about 60 million gallons a year of biodiesel, and those plants still offset about 400,000 tons carbon annually. So I'm really sort of proud of that. But the recession, 07, took us out. And I was going to stay home and be a cat man. I was going to get the kids to school and do lunches and do soccer and laundry. And my wife called bullshit on that. She said, you're not going to fucking do that. And I said, okay, well, what do I do? And it was almost like a challenge. And she said, well, you know how to distill, because to do the biodiesel side, we had to invent a way to distill biodiesel. It had never been distilled before until we invented the way to do it. She said, well, you know how to distill and you like hooch. And pretty much from there, it started the path of why we're sitting here together now, getting to share some spirit. So, yeah, it's quite the diagram. And then along the way, I went around looking for stills, and I didn't really like what I was seeing, what was offered in the industry just from a technology perspective. And so I came back to Courtney and said, hey, we're going to open that distillery, but also could we open another business to build distillation equipment based upon continuous flow methodology for micro distillers and sell those into the industry as well. And she said, sure. And so we did. So we have two distilleries. We have the one that we sort of started everything in, and then when that got too small, we kept it. We've got a second distillery. And in that second distillery, we also build the manufacturing of the distillation equipment there. So when we build our equipment, we make booze on it before we ship it to its users and to its owners. And then I put that booze in my rick and age it, and then I sell that later. So it's a great deal. It's just a great deal all the way around.
Now, do you sell that back to your customers, or does that become some, special test liquid?
No, actually, I just run our recipe straight across it. So my single malt goes in the rack. I throw some vodka through it to make sure it all works. But we basically just use our mash and just because we run the same equipment here, obviously. So we invented this distillation technology. We built it for ourselves, and then proving it out for ourselves convinced others that it was the way for them to go as well. So
it's really too bad you don't keep it separate, because I can think of several offensive names for a brand using that kind of whiskey.
Oh yeah. And there's some really great cats who shall not go named here, but who have come out in the past and maybe have bought a still from me or whatnot, and they brought out their recipes, right? So they'd say, all right, we want to do our recipe, make sure these are pre-existing distilleries, make sure your still can make our juice, and then they typically never ask for it back. So I've got like barrels of booze that are recipes of award-winning spirits from around the country sitting in my rick underneath my bond, and I keep wondering, what I'm going to do with them.
Start a little group called Orphan Barrels. That's
that won't get me screwed at all. No,
they have an orphan girl, right? You have some.
That's right. In fact, funny story about that. We have a bourbon cream liqueur called the Orphan Girl, and years ago we got this winery out of California, Justin Winery. And they send us a cease and desist. And they said, no, we've got this wine called Orphan. And our customers are going to get confused by Orphan Girl Bourbon Cream Liqueur. So you have to stop doing that. Well, they also sent a letter to Diageo and said, it's Diageo Brown Forman. that does the orphan barrel.
Diageo.
So send it to them too. And so we called up Diageo's attorneys. We're like, so, and they're like, how about this?
You want to work together on this?
Having it? Yeah, I said basically, I'm good with you guys having it. Are you guys good with me having it? So Diageo made it, and I made a deal. And then Diageo just went and hammered Justin into the ground. And so it was sort of like, it was this really like heartwarming kind of thing. Like it just felt good.
Yeah, just holding hands across the alley, kind of.
That's right. Well, I mean, it's more about that collaborative thing.
Hands
Like,
across
why
the
am I
alley?
here right now?
I don't know where that one came from.
I dig you guys.
You know,
I dig
like-
working with Liz.
Or, I don't know.
Do people hold hands across an alley?
It's
Yeah.
a very, very narrow alley.
Is that like hobos? Little hobos holding hands
It
across
has
the
a
alley?
completely
Just never
different
mind.
meaning. when you're
Collaboration.
talking
Let's
about
go back to collaboration.
Yeah, collaboration.
I kind of like the idea of Diageo doing things for the small guy because they do that so much.
Well, it was fascinating because I think it was this. I think we tell the story. You think that the story is usually true. That there's a lot of just butting of heads between groups and people in this industry. But I mean, we're all sitting here right now because we actually all dig each other and we want to just talk and hang out and support each other. And I think what wound up happening there was Diageo and our company. We basically said, look, this is ridiculous. I mean, no one's going to mistake a California blended red wine for whiskey. There's nothing really, and so if it hadn't even shown up, it wouldn't have been a problem. But then once we found out
cream
that
whiskey,
just being, yeah,
This is
exactly,
a-
bourbon cream liqueur.
Yeah,
Cream
so
liqueur,
They're
yeah.
just being dead. And so Diageo and I just said, fuck it, let's just go back on them. And I just got out of the way, and all of a sudden it all went away. It was really cool, and it felt good.
Though actually, Journeyman had to change their whiskey because they had the Ravenswood rye, and the Ravenswood winery sued them
Oh yeah.
and it made them cease and desist. Which
yeah,
was
that was a little on the nose.
Yeah, their winery.
That was pretty
they're a little
close.
snotty. Wine snobs.
So, I
Distilling's
don't know.
nice.
I prefer the collaborative part. That's a little bit more my bag.
Yeah.
Well, and Diageo also has their distilled ventures. So
Right.
where they do help invest, though it always
They do,
feels like
yeah.
they're trying to also get their foot in the door. of
Just a
eventually
little.
taking it over.
Yeah, it just happens to have this one word in it that's the same as venture capital.
Yeah. They're like symbiotes. So slowly, it's like an infection. Eventually, it takes over, and you become a
Can't
zombie.
move anymore. The vine is
Well, that's where all the
I
money
mean-
went for Liz. Like Liz got all that money from Diageo, right? Like they sent her out with like bags of cash with like the big dollar sign symbol on it, so she could dive into pools of it like Scrooge McDuck. I mean, that's how they roll.
She's
Backing
not
that
saying
up,
no. She's not saying
I-
no.
I actually got the privilege of working at a Distill Venture site earlier this year. So that's astounding, that the distillery I worked at in Denmark. And I think there's a lot more collaboration just behind the scenes. And, back to that, I think it's a little bit more than just sort of foot in the door. But that's my vantage point.
Well, I always got the impression, though, and John, you might know a little more about this than I, but I always got the impression that the big guys seem to be having a hard time keeping up with a lot of the smaller guys as far as innovation, and I think they always investing in them and getting close to them. That was their way of kind of
Hoping that it'd rub off.
Yeah, or eventually too. Like I said, I mean, at least with Bacardi and Pernod, they've invested big time, and then eventually go whole hog and buy up the brand or the distillery, like with Angel's Envy, or Teeling's is dealing with Bacardi, and eventually I think Bacardi's gonna buy and get an Irish whiskey in their portfolio. That's what I'm thinking. It's my little.
I think probably taking cues from the brewing industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lou, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, this whole time we've been talking, I've been thinking about Leinenkugel. Because, I mean, Miller bought them outright and essentially just walked away.
I thought you were just
they
thinking
give
about
money
beer.
every now and then. And I'm sorry, John, we're talking about shit that has
let's-
nothing
I
to do
know,
with beer.
John.
Right?
Yeah.
so
I'm fucking loving it.
I had a couple questions first. So your two
Shoot.
facilities, what's your kind of capacity?
Because
Because you guys are fairly large.
We have our moments, yeah. So the distillery, the first facility, that distillery, it'll distill 1,000 gallons of beer every 8 hours. So if you're doing whiskey, vodka, gin, it's a single pass system. So if you got 1,000 gallons of beer in front of it in 8 hours, that'll be a product. And so that's sort of its throughput rate. And then the second distillery, the one that we build distills at, we're actually currently building out a facility up here to do 5,000 gallons of beer every 8 hours, and that's going to be used mostly for a malt project, doing just straight malt whiskey. And so that's sort of our scale. I mean, really, what's sort of fascinating is that the bourbon cream liqueur that we spoke about earlier, the Orphan Girl. It's a pretty big number as far as our total sales. It's fascinating. I mean, we outsell Bailey's in the state of Montana, and wow. It's huge. It's a thing, right? I think at one point we were the 7th highest selling 750 ml in the state. So we sold more than Jameson. We sold more than, it was just a thing. It was really pretty wild. And so that product, it's a cream based product, right? So I'm not a dairy. I'm not out here milking anything, right? Like we bring in a lot of cream and then we wind up doing a blend with our bourbon and then packaging that. And so we've got a packaging line that do a couple thousand 9-liter cases a day.
Now, are you guys the biggest craft distiller in Montana?
We were. I'm a little. I really, really love Willie's Distillery down in Ennis, Montana. They're super tiny little town. I think there's like 800 people in that town. And last year they sold more than we did, just barely. And so our brand ambassadors are out there just kicking ass trying to take that crown back. But they've got a really great suite of products. I mean, we're seriously out in the market. We're about 6 SKUs. Probably 3 SKUs are really high selling, command 70% of our market. They've done a really good job of spreading out a larger portfolio of spirits, so and have a good penetration on all those SKUs, and so it's pretty cool to watch them go. And it was great because I was down there helping them paint when they were opening up, and it's just, they're awesome people, so it's really cool to see them rock.
Well, I saw that I've been watching the miniseries Montana, and I know for a fact you can go down and just wipe out everybody at Willie's. If you to viewer and listener who's on this right now, Yellowstone and that's all. Yellowstone, that's it. Not Montana.
It's all bullshit.
What?
But, come visit. I won't shoot you. Every time you just show up to town, and we'll have a great time. We'll drink a lot of whiskey. You'll go home hungover, but that'll be about it.
Yeah, according to Yellowstone, Kevin Costner's a serial killer. He's killed so many people, and because he's
and his son is like, I don't know. Yeah, it's the goofiest bit of. It's fun to watch. Don't get me wrong; it's a guilty pleasure, but it's the goofiest bit of soap opera that has ever been told about Montana.
Yeah.
Is this like a Netflix thing?
Amazon Prime.
I think is where you find it.
Prime.
Yeah,
okay.
Yellowstone, not Montana.
It is a guilty pleasure. Like so, we watched it. Our families watched it all the way through, but it's not us. It's this other vision of how people think we are, and it's sort of funny. There's some really great. I shared that piece with you guys, the Under the Big Sky piece that they did about us. That's actually a series that won a lot of awards and is still going on, and they go champion and tell the real stories of Butte businesses, but Montana businesses, Montana institutions, Montana artists, people who are, Paralympians. They just tell these really great stories of who we really are. And I think the Under the Big Sky pieces, I'm just so blown away by, because they really tell a really special vision of who we are and who we really think we are too.
Yeah, Will, I don't know if you can, but Will, if you can, put the link down. It's about an 8-minute, and I highly recommend it. It's also posted on our Facebook, Sip of Knowledge.
Yeah, they really made me look good. I don't know if you can tell here, but there's a lot of makeup and other people offsite that made this shit look good.
I think they got Kevin Costner to play you in that video.
Yeah, in the movie, it's definitely going to be Kevin Costner playing me.
That's not the guy we talked to.
You were very stoic.
But wait till I get the likeness rights on that. I'll retire. Screw this whiskey stuff.
Yeah.
So tell us more about Butte and how you guys decided. I mean, why Butte? Why are you? You're not from Montana.
No, I got to Butte when I was 6. So I was born in D.C., lived in England and China and a couple.
Wait, you were
places.
actually born in D.C.? There are people
born
in D.C.?
Well, only Maryland, so just one of the suburbs.
That's just outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so we chased my dad's postdoc in solid state physics. And then when they got divorced, we chased my stepdad's career as a college professor. And that took us to China and various other places. And so, but for the most part, I grew up in Butte, America. I mean, it's where I found my place. There's a thing about Butte. You're not really from Butte unless you were born at the hospital here or on somebody's bed or in a car on the way to the hospital. You're not really from Butte. And so I can't really claim that title, I guess. But luckily, my son was born here, so he's a Butte rat, which is great. But Butte's a pretty fascinating place. It was some of that in that Will's going to be posting up about that video that under the Big Sky video. I think that people don't understand is that you have copper in a building or a home that you grew up in that came from right underneath where I'm sitting right now. We literally powered the world from 1890 to 1930. So much copper came out here that, Salt Lake City is about 5 hours away, about 500 miles away. And you can, if you were to take all the copper that we pulled out of here, you could pave a 4-lane highway 6 inches deep in pure copper all the way to Salt Lake. And so to do that took a lot of people. So at the turn of the century, we were the largest city west of the Mississippi. We were bigger than LA. We were bigger than San Francisco. We were bigger than Seattle. And it was all about mining. It was about powering the world. And that's really what this place came from. And like I was telling you guys yesterday, the second light bulb ever lit was lit here in Butte, because they needed to power the lights under the mines, and they had all the copper. So why not start stringing wire and making it happen?
Is that where they came up with the term?
That's my new ambition.
Yeah.
What, the copper?
What's your new ambition?
To light a light bulb?
To get lit in Butte. That's my.
Come on out. I'll take you down.
That's what I want to do.
Is that your new tagline? Maybe I don't.
Lou's Government streets are paved with copper. Yeah, it's gotta
Just
go.
everywhere.
I gotta go.
Everywhere.
I gotta go.
Wobbling Lou. That's all old Butte needs. And now talk about, too, because this will lead up to talking about the whiskey, the Irish connection to Butte.
Sure. So, to pull all that ore out of the ground, and it was hard rock mining. I mean, guys going underground with pick and shovel and dynamite and bringing it up by hand in a lot of cases. It was all, a lot of old country sort of made this town happen. It's a huge melting pot, this town. So I grew up with kids from whose last name started with Mick, or other kids whose last names ended with ski, because there's a lot of Eastern and Western European influences in this town. So you had a large Finnish population, large Irish population, Czech, Serb, Croat. And so, but one of the really sort of like key things about it is a lot of Irish came here, immigrated here. And it was so much so that, I know Chicago thinks it puts on the St. Patrick's Day, but it doesn't. Thank you, Lou.
Here we go.
But what happens is, we're a town of 30,000 people. When we put on the St. Patrick's Day, there's 100,000 people that show up to this town to participate in it. And anytime the Premier of Ireland travels abroad, he typically in that trip abroad to the States is going to make a stop to Butte, because there's so much influence, heavy influence of Ireland here, that they actually sort of just call us a remote county of Ireland. It's the Irish Catholic presence is strong in town. And of course, the distillery I'm at right now, our second distillery, is built at the Kelly mine site. And that whiskey we all opened and started is named the Kelly. And the Kelly is Kelley. Aw, you guys are the best. Love you. So what we wound up doing is Kelly was actually.
I didn't even put the top back on. Apparently, that's like.
Keep drinking, Liz. So, and the Kelly's basically situated right at the bottom of a neighborhood called Dublin Gulch, and Dublin Gulch is no longer here. But a lot of the the ethnic neighborhoods of Butte. You had Finntown, and you had Double Gulch, and you had Meaderville and McQueen, and these were all, obviously a Finnish town and an Irish town, an Italian town, and so these were all just burgs, if you will, of all these people that emigrated to Butte. And in fact, one of our other products, the Acquisition, it's this blended Canadian aged in bourbon barrels and red and white wine barrels that we put together. The front label of that, because there was so much just added to it and played around and tried to build a product out of it that we really enjoy. The label on the front is a sign that is underground, still underground to this day in Butte, but there were so many different cultures here and so many different languages being spoken that they had to print the signs to say, hello, warning, dynamite, don't die. All of that stuff was in like 14 different languages, just so guys went underground. There wasn't a lingua franca. They had to find a way to communicate, and they just put up all the signs in all these different languages.
Wow, that's and then like I said, I believe one of the copper barons, who was Irish, since he made it big, I think he, at least the story I had heard, he tried to make it. He encouraged more Irish to come because he treated them really well. I mean, they got houses and they took care of them.
That's a funny story.
Or
so
something.
William Clark was one of the Copper Kings, as they called him. And he was Irish born, and then he got here, and he did a really good job of rising up quickly and basically buying the town. This was very much a company town. You've heard of the Pinkertons. They brought the Pinkertons in here to bust up unions. This was one of the very first, I know Chicago's got a strong, proud union background, but this is actually where unions started in America, was in Butte. And they brought in the Pinkertons to beat him down. And he bribed his way into a U.S. Senate seat and then was immediately removed thereafter. So he was sort of a shitbag, but what he also had, though, was he had a lot of vision. And one of his visions was he wanted to see a lot of people get here and at least have an opportunity to try to do what he did. And so one of the things they did was he had this, Anaconda Company was the name of the company, and they had these basically postcards printed, and they give them to the miners, and they say, send this home, send this to Ireland, and when they come over, to come for a job, make sure they have this postcard with them. And what the postcard said on the front is, it said, send me to the 7 stacks of the Never Sweat. And the Never Sweat was mine here in Butte. In fact, we named our bourbon after it. And the Never Sweat had 7 smokestacks for its smelter. And it was so iconic and so well known that what would happen is these guys would come across Ellis Island and they would pin this postcard to their chest, to their shirt. And the immigration agents would see them and basically herd them into a group and then shove them on a train to send them to Butte, America, because they knew what that meant. And so, so the one thing about Clark,
they were getting a kickback for that.
You bet they were. Because
that's the American way.
So here's the funniest thing. So Clark County in Nevada is named after William Clark. So Las Vegas, that's named after William Clark. He died extraordinarily wealthy. The phrase "richer than Rockefeller" was pretty much coined about him. In fact, his daughter recently just died in her late 90s in New York City. She had the largest apartment on Fifth Avenue. It was something like 5 stories, and she had the largest property in Connecticut, the largest privately held property in California, and she still had $400 million in the bank. And so he made all that money in the early he died in the early 1900s, and all that money still existed. So it was at a time, if you were to equate this money to today, obviously Elon Musk went up today, I guess. He's like richer than Zuckerberg now. But basically, if that money was translated to today, this guy would be in the top 5. It was an extraordinary amount of wealth he was able to generate. And what was pretty cool about it is that, no, he didn't share it. But what he did do was he wound up building a place where people could come and try to pull it off themselves and try to find those riches themselves.
Is his daughter looking for any heirs?
She died. She never married. She died without there's a great, I forget the name of the book. I'll find it and post it in here. But there's a book written about it recently, and she died without heirs. And so, there's been a lot of questions about what you do with this. But I want to call attention to one thing that's also really cool is Will put it up that a gentleman named Bruce posted this link about the Pekin Noodle Parlor. So the Pekin Noodle Parlor is there's a great Chinatown here as well. A very Western kind of Chinatown was what we had here. And there's this great restaurant called the Pekin. And what my wife and I love, my wife, when she moved here, she was blown away by it. I think the thing she said is that, you know, Quentin Tarantino could walk in here and start filming right now. It does not need set dressing. It does not need like he would just come in and it would fit perfectly in any film he's ever done. And so the Pekin is the oldest continuously operating Chinese restaurant in the United States. And it's just down the street here. And they have this chopping board, this chopping block that's been used so much that it's dipped down inches. I mean, it's just awesome. And it's and I've been eating there since I was a kid, and I would be ashamed if I didn't call attention to that. Just the history of Butte, that melting pot, which you might see in that the name I put up here. I said Butte America, and it's on our bottles too. It's how we identify. We're not we're not Butte, Montana. We're Butte America because we're so well represented by the people who made America. But they really came here and made something special.
Little melting pot, a mini melting pot within the melting pot.
Yeah,
I think actually the Museum of Food and Drink in Brooklyn did a little pop-up last year with Chinese American food, and I think they had some pictures at the museum from that.
At the Pekin, yeah.
I think this calls for a road trip, guys.
Anytime, I'll take care of you guys. You know that.
The Butte. I mean, like I said, I've been to all 50 states except for Montana, Alaska, Hawaii, and Maine. That's the only 4 I haven't been to. So it's about time. Lot to come. Me and Kevin Costa, Yellowstone.
Is now a good time to dig into the liquid? Dig into some more technical?
Yeah, because this leads to
and
this leads into also we'll talk about the whole single malt.
Sounds great. Talk about Sounds great too, right, Liz?
So it goes to an old question that Phil asked here. So Phil asked, what grain do we use the most? We use malt the most. Largest malt house in America is 3 hours north of here. It's Malt Europe. They have 3 football fields underneath one roof that they hold at like 68 degrees all year long. They go through 1 million gallons of water every day, and they do all the malt basically for Diageo and Coors and Miller and AB and all those guys. So they're only 3 hours away. And what Courtney and I really dug when we got down this project and started figuring out what do we want to do is we loved malt whiskey. And we really felt that the American brand of malt whiskey wasn't well represented 8, 9, 10 years ago. There was a few. Of course, there's a lot more now. Yeah. But we really felt it was missing. And so the very first barrel of anything that we ever distilled, I distilled at Michigan State University with Johnny Jeffrey, who pinged in. So, hey, Bubba. So he and I helped him. I didn't help him do anything. I went out there and he helped me prototype what I was looking for. And what I was looking for was something you actually can't make in the United States and call a single malt. And we'll talk about that in just a sec. But what I really wanted was and Courtney too, we both wanted a malt that was influenced by used cooperage, that wasn't just a new cooperage. We wanted a malt that was influenced by both high distillation proofs, so something just sub 160, and then stuff that's influenced way down in like dirty, like dank, stank 102 proof off the still, because we felt that, this sort of just fire and forget, let's set it at 120, always put it in new cooperage, just wasn't a malt that we really dug. And if we're going to open a distillery, we decided that we wanted to do something special. So what we did was we sat down and we went to Johnny J and we said, look, when he was with Michigan State's Artisan Distilling program, sorry if I got that wrong, Johnny, but went out there because I knew how to build the equipment. I knew how to invent distillation systems and make the science work. But what I knew is that, and I think I say it in that video, is that to distill is to concentrate the essence of. And so if you make crap and you start distilling it, you just concentrate crap. And I didn't want to do that. And so what I needed to do is I needed to learn how to make. Yeah, right. I mean, put it right there.
Don't make crap.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So
raw materials.
So we went to Johnny J.
It's really good crap.
It's great crap. So we went through them and said, look, help me get through that part. So help me figure out the mash and the ferment regimes. And then we ran some distillations on the pot stills that they had there. And then I came back and I modified that distillation regime into our continuous flow system. And we started making single malt. And we laid it down for years and years and years and years and years. And every once in a while, I'd find a barrel that I thought was ready, but the rest of the suite of barrels was not ready. And then finally this year, we got to a place where we felt like we had a release, like it was going to be something great. And by this point, Reed Huddleston had joined us from Deep Ellum, and the guys, if you think I'm a nerd, I worship Reed's nerdness. Like, he's just over the fucking top. And what was great about him is he could take what we had done all those 8 years and different production managers and put together what Courtney and I had originally envisioned. Like, he'd say, I needed this, I need that, and we need to put a little bit of this in a sherry butt, and then let's bring it in. And what we have now was this really great plan. So you're in Butte, right? And I told you we'll whip ass on Chicago's St. Patrick's Day. So what do we do? We plan to release this, the R. Kelly single malt, which I'll talk a little bit more about why it's not a single malt in a sec, on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, cool.
And then COVID.
Yeah.
So, and we shut down, our whole town shut down 2 days before St. Pat's. So now, right. So we wait 8 years to do this. We finally get it done. We're super proud of it. We can't really share it with anybody. And late spring, May, it started coming out, and we're super proud of it. It's what we wanted to drink. It's right in line with what we were looking for. It's not a heavy ester influenced malt. It's not a new oak influenced malt. It's sort of this blend of things we see out of the old country. It's frankly things we see out of Ireland.
Did you play with a lot of different varietals, or you just found sort of one particular barley varietal that really made the magic happen for you? Just
one, yeah. So we basically we concentrated in around Malt Europe's barleys, malts that they come out of there, and they're mostly distillers malts. They're actually used as adjunct malts, not necessarily a standalone malt. But really enjoyed working with it. We like the product, and that's what's made what we have here. And so I keep saying, hey, it's not really a single malt. So if you look at the bottle, it actually says, Kelly single malt right there on it. Well, that's a fanciful term, because in the standards of identity, and what's that say on the back, Lou?
Whiskey distilled from malt mash.
There you go. So in the standards of identity for listener and viewer, what you have is, if in the United States, if you make a single malt and you put it in a used barrel, you don't get to call it a malt whiskey. You get to call it a whiskey from a malt mash. And so here we are 8 years in, trying to make something that we feel like I can walk into any liquor store and find as a single malt if it comes from Ireland or comes from Scotland or comes from India or comes from Japan. But I couldn't call it a single malt the way I made it here in the States. And so one of the things I've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years with the American Single Malt Commission is working on changing the standards for what a single malt is in America and creating a standard for an American single malt. And it includes the use of used barrels if you so choose. And our goal there is to basically get to a place where our customers identify that as, anything like you'd see from Teeling or Bushmills or anyone else.
So John, though, the whole thing with the single malt, American single malt movement, that I'm always a little worried about is that the guys in Scotland have recognized that they have painted themselves into a corner as far as innovation. And what I always see here in the U.S., you visit all these different distilleries and see what everyone else is doing, and you think, well, there's so much more freedom without categories. And
absolutely.
And so are you guys, are you walking softly here and just going, we've got to make sure that we don't box ourselves in?
Well, no, because I think one of the things we're not doing is we're not looking to tear down any of the current standards of what other malts can be. But really, it's interesting is the current standards in TTB actually limit what Americans can do for malt. Again, as soon as you can't use other cooperage, you become a malt distilled from a whiskey distilled from a malt mash, and you can't call them malt whiskey anymore. And so it's really funny. I heard what you said, Martin, but I think it's Marty. I think it's just a little bit more. It's actually more restrictive. And if we're going out and putting things out there, I think the thing's interesting about the Scottish whiskey groups and Diageo and all these others that I think we're trying to convince them of is that you don't want us calling what we're doing single malt until it's sort of categorized and classified as the same thing, because we're leading to brand confusion for your customers. Like they're walking up and seeing, okay, here's a true single malt from Scotland or from Ireland, and then they see mine, and I get to use the fanciful term single malt, but it's not really a single malt as far as the feds are concerned. And so there's this brand confusion. And if we wind up saying, look, just get the American single malt idea through, get it into the standards for TTB standards of identity, then basically they, Diageo and all the other big cats who have a bunch of malt interest in malt so far, can feel that we're not impeding on their brand. We're not impeding on what their customers think of what a malt is. And so basically, so I hear what you're saying, but really in the end, I think that I feel more restricted by what the feds currently say we can do, because when we get done with it, we can't call it malt.
Yeah.
I think you can worry too much about that, because you look at, bourbon, the regs are very restrictive. Scotch, the regs are pretty restrictive. Canadian, they're not. Irish, they're not.
Right.
And I don't see
the Irish aren't
a huge problem.
The Irish aren't yet. They have, and we've talked to some of the guys in Ireland that they have kind of. I think the problem lies when you find out who's in control. In Ireland, with single pot still, you had the big boys decide, okay, here's what a single pot still whiskey is, and the other guys go, wait a minute, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to paint a picture, and it looks like me.
But I think that's what's so great about the commission, the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, because it wasn't. I mean, Diageo was a very late player, I feel like, to that conversation. And, how many different distilleries have been a part of that commission or touched?
Oh, gosh, there's a couple hundred or signed up.
Yeah.
Well, but, that goes back.
I don't know. I think that I used to think that restrictive regulation thing was a big deal. The more I look at it, the more I think that doesn't. It's not necessarily a problem. I mean, holy hell, Scotch regulations are pretty damn tight, and yet you've got over 100 distilleries, and their whiskeys all taste different.
Yeah, there's a good range.
But that range, I think, over in Scotland's this own different little animal. I mean, there is an element over there where they're all making, basically using the same ingredients. And really, the big thing that they can use is maybe the shape of the still, and types of barrel finishes.
I'll say this every show: microbiological terroir. Okay, I got it in for today.
Oh my God! Wow, that sounds like something I have to go see my doctor to have an ointment for.
Yeah, it's like a green discharge.
Hey, John, you haven't
pumps for that.
John hasn't said fuck yet.
I know.
Oh no, he did.
I think I did.
He said it at least once.
Okay.
He definitely said it once.
All right, let me chalk
I should have had a fuck flag that I could hold up.
I know.
Just a flicker, like a.
Yeah.
So,
hey, what are you? Some kind of fuck flag?
Something that I wanted to get back to.
Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome. Especially around
she's the one.
She's
the
the one.
single malt category. And I think one of the big things at play too is, I think when people, from a consumer lens, they think about single malt, they think about pot stills, right? And they don't necessarily, think about column distillation. They equate column distillation to just, big distilleries, Canadian, something that's, maybe like very clean, more neutral. But I want to kind of get back to, and I'm an advocate of that because I've also made single malt on column stills, and they make lovely liquids. So talk to me about, what was did you get any backlash with choosing to go with continuous systems in the beginning, and then also how is that playing out with the single malt conversation?
I also want to talk about that word choice that you say continuous rather than column. You don't say column much. You say continuous mostly. I don't want to ask about that because words are my business. Sorry, but we're all on the same. So just take all of that and talk about it.
Business is my words. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'll start with Lou's, and that'll dovetail me into Liz's question.
Okay.
So continuous versus column.
Ooh, he's good. He's very good.
Yeah. You can throw a column off the side of a pot, right? And a lot of distillers need to in order to get to higher degrees of rectification, but you're still limited by the initial starting volume of the pot. Like basically, you throw in a bunch of Coors Light, you turn it on, you get some alcohol at the top, you dump a bunch of non-alcoholic Coors Light, you start over, right? So a continuous system typically is in columns, but you can actually have continuous systems through pots. I mean, you can make this run through a thumper system if you wanted to, and you can do it through multiple pots. It's just not all that efficient. But when you do a continuous system using columns, using thumpers, whatever it may be, it's about continuing the process. So like if we go back to that example before, a typical pot still I think of as a tea kettle. So again, throw your Coors Light in your tea kettle, go home, throw it on your stove. First thing comes out the whistle is alcohol. You're going to boil that off pretty quick, and then you're left with non-alcoholic beer. You dump your teapot, you refill with Coors Light, you start over. So that kind of process, that dump, refill, that's batch. So continuous is take that tea kettle analogy, and we're just going to keep filling it as alcohol is coming out. So you don't turn it off, you don't dump it, you don't restart. And so, our system are columns, and I know a lot of systems that Liz have worked with are columns. There are continuous pot systems. They're sort of rare and weird, but they're out there. And so what you wind up having is that when you talk continuous, I say it that way because you can see columns on the side of pot stills, and I think that confuses people. And then we go back to sort of Liz's question. I think one of the things initially when we started is we're going to do continuous. People said, okay, fine, well, let's just find out if you can make anything that's good. And so we really, we were making the malt. The malt didn't come out to just now. That was 8 years ago we started making booze. And so one of the first things, of course, we were making was bourbon and vodka and gin and a whole bunch of stuff on our systems, of course. But the bourbon was pretty easy to market because I think a lot of people didn't know that, most of the bourbon they drink comes off continuous systems and column continuous systems, Maker's Mark, anything from Brown-Forman. I mean, and there's like, oh, what do you mean? Maker's Mark is made on a continuous system, like big columns? It's like, yeah, that's how it's made.
No, the bottle is shaped like a pot still.
I know, it's just like a pot.
I've heard that.
But
really,
I think what's really funny is that I came from an industry.
Looks like that.
Yeah. I came from an industry where you wrapped all your columns, the continuous columns, you always insulate them and then put a wrap around the insulation because you don't want it to get weathered, right? So all the biodiesel plants I ever built, we had biodiesel and glycerin and methanol distillation systems that were all continuous flow. And you wrap them in stainless because it was just beautiful. It just gleamed in the dark, right? So the first stills I put up in our place, I did the insulation, I wrapped them in stainless. And people would walk in for the tour and they're like, where's the stills? So I went back to those stills and I wrapped them in copper. And then all of a sudden I was like, hey, there's the stills. So, we have this, so to Liz's question, we have, to Liz's question, what we really own, all of us as micro distilleries, and even like, the big guys, makers and all those guys, what we all own is we own marketing companies that happen to make hooch. And part of the story, the marketing story is copper and pot stills or whatever. But it turns out when you pull back that the wizard behind the curtain, there's just a shitload of bullshit going on. And when you really get back to what's going on, it's all really done sort of the same way. I mean, and so Liz, to your question, people were really questioning. It's like, hey, I don't see this sort of onion pot still thing. How can you possibly make bourbon? I said, well, you had makers. And they said, yeah. And I said, okay, well, that's a continuous system. And as soon as you get a chance to engage the customer like that, it helps because then you can start educating. And then once you start educating, it doesn't matter how many words you fucking say. I mean, you got to throw a bottle makers up and a bottle of your bourbon up and say, just try them. Or throw a bottle of a pot stilled up and throw a bottle of yours up and say, just try them. Well, and ultimately, the best whiskey in the world is whiskey you like the best. And hopefully they come to like what we make. But when we wound up starting this process, we really did wind up, to your point, Liz, educating a lot that a continuous flow system, a continuous, in this case, column system, can make genuinely good whiskey. And in fact, it had been done for so long that people just didn't know it because they've been marketed to them differently with, like you were saying, Lou, with a bottle of Makers that looks like it's a pot still.
Yeah, a shiny little pretty object to flash in front of people. Yeah.
Well, and also the copper pot stills, though, have become, people walk around with pins. Well, they're on signs. They're kind of the international symbol of distilling. Whereas column stills, when I do tastings, I'll put a picture of it on the tasting mat so people know what it looks like, and they still don't get it. They go,
I would rock a column still lapel pin. I would do that.
Oh yeah,
let's make that happen. Let's make that happen.
I think you wear one cardinal on your head.
Have any of you seen that new Brown-Forman place on Main Street in Louisville? The column still they have there.
Mm.
It's like a temple.
Right, and I think it's really cool because they call it
It
out.
is the
Pictures
most
of it, right?
freaking beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's another great one at there's a couple places where they really call these out and they show attention to them now, where they knew before that, you know, I think people are willing to start telling another story. I think enough of our customers got educated on how this stuff is actually made, that, you know, that Sky Vodka comes from an ethanol refinery in Pekin, Illinois. I mean, the people figured this out, and now it's not, when that mystery got pulled back, it didn't take away their pleasure or what they liked about the booze. They just finally said, okay, fine, quit bullshitting me. And that, you know, that was Templeton. Templeton got their dicks kicked in for bullshitting people for all this time, right? And they're back because
They've
they finally
got a
decided to start
facility,
telling the story. And then they put up a facility, and it was okay. And it took a time to get to that. But I think, you know, maybe certainly when I entered the industry 8 years ago, people were, you know, still really under this impression that, what do you mean, like column stills that no one uses? Oh, it's like, oh, probably 90% of anything you've ever drank came from a column still, but whatever. You know?
Also, though, John, going back to your point that everyone's a marketing company, there are brands that go out and that's what they market. That's what they talk about.
Yeah.
And if they have the biggest bandwidth, well, that's what everyone's going to take away.
That becomes the story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It. And to Liz's question earlier, and I keep saying, is like having that contact with the customer is the only place we really get to have that kind of education. Where I think we do get overwhelmed by the big stores. So sorry, Liz, you were saying.
No, it's okay. And kind of full circle, you know, back to some of the other education around Butte. I mean, have they been equally as hurdly, or, you know, what has that in terms of remessaging kind of the story of Butte, remessaging the story of column distillation? Have those been different in their own way, or? No,
it's been actually really cool. So, you know, there were 100,000 people here at the turn of the century. When I went to high school and graduated from high school here, there were 30,000 people here, right? And so there still is. It's like 35. And, you know, in a town that's, you know, Courtney says it best. My wife says it best. I'm just going to fuck it up. I'm going to try my best. Okay. So basically, you've got a town with this kind of history, and it wants to really concentrate on its past. But, you know, there's a place and time where new businesses, new ideas, new ways of doing things allow you to start telling a story about your future. And Butte's past is just rich. It's just littered with history. I mean, we could make Yellowstone miniseries look like just crap with the true stories you could tell of what happened in Butte, and it blow people away for years and years. It would be the #1 rated thing you'd see on television because the history is just glorious, but it's the history. And so now what's wound up happening is, like, Courtney and I took over a building that it wasn't abandoned, but it basically was underutilized. And it was one of a lot of the buildings in our uptown that are like that. And we sort of showed Butte, hey, there's this other thing we can do. Let's make some whiskey. And Butte totally got on board. Now, it didn't hurt that there's, you know, you see those stats of per capita, you know, alcohol consumption nationwide. Silver Bow County, our county, is the highest per capita alcohol consumption of any county in the United States. So it doesn't hurt. But then when you open up and say, hey, let's make it here. And then let's also have an export product in the concept of let's invent some distillation technology. So interestingly, Courtney and I we own the distilleries, but we also own the second largest stainless steel welding fabrication shop in Butte because we build these stills, right? So, and only one of these stills has ever been sold in the state of Montana. All the rest have been sold outside the state of Montana. They've been sold outside the United States. And so now there's this other story we get to tell about the things we're exporting, not just the story of Butte, of Butte's past, but now what it could be and what its future can look like.
How much of that business goes up to Canada, your neighbor to the north?
Booze, nothing yet, but machines, yeah, they've been going up there pretty well.
Yeah, because I mean that's burgeoning. The whole Canadian spirits.
You know, everywhere's burgeoning. I mean, but I think what's happening right now, especially what we've been seeing in the last 4 or 5 years in the industry, is the people who are showing up at the door typically are pre-existing distilleries. So they're showing up because they've been running a pot still, and they know they kind of like just man hours that it takes to get, a single run through. And they're like, okay, fine, let's just go buy a 4 times larger pot still. But then they just know what that means. And they hear about us, word of mouth usually, because we don't do any marketing or advertising. And they come to us, and we'll, in advance, they'll send their grain out, they'll send the recipe out, we'll mash and ferment to their specs, and then we run it over their machine to show them that we can make what they've been making on a pot still. And it gives them that degree of confidence that with a continuous system, back to Lou's question a while ago, typically, Lou, like, if you're gonna take 1,000 gallons of wash, even in a 1,000-gallon pot still is a strip, and then you've got a 250-gallon finishing still, you got a day. You got more than a day. You're, especially if you're cracking a vodka, you might be into that 2 or 3 days before you get to a final product. They come to us and we say, all right, 1,000-gallon system, you'll be done in 8 hours. Go put it in the barrels. Like, we can come off the still at barrel proof. So just put the barrel there and fill it while you're coming off the still, and go hammer the bung home and put it away. And I think that when people see that, it's been one of the things that's really been a differentiator in how we sell and how we do what we do, because, our job is, like I said earlier, we're marketing companies that happen to make hooch. If you're sitting around babysitting a pot still and testing and smelling for cuts, you're missing what's actually important, which is connecting with your customers, selling that second bottle, because they're always going to buy the first bottle. You want them coming back for the second bottle. And if you don't have time to do that because you're doing all this other work, then you're missing something. And I think that's what we really find a lot of our customers now are finding us are, it's not necessarily new distilleries. It's distilleries that don't want to spend a lot of time doing what they've been doing for years.
That was, Kelly? It's just Kelly, not the Kelly. Kelly. Is Kelly out? Is it out on the market?
It is. We've been out since just late spring, and so we've had sort of the summer and whatnot with it out in the market. It's doing really well. We just pushed it into Chicago. You should be able to find it. Our BC merchants, our lovely distributing partner out there, called for a nice order. Brian, so you'll find it. You'll find it, Brian. Anyone Brian puts it into, you'll find it at all those places. And he's the bomb. He's really great guy to work with.
You gotta love a man who names his company with his own initials, right?
Fuck yeah! I take some moxie and balls, but
moxie.
But it's going really well, and I think what we did is we put it out we made it in a way that we're going to be allocating it, because we knew we'd never be able to afford to put away more than the market could ever bear. So there's just this allocation perspective to it. But every year we'll have a couple thousand cases, and that's what we're sort of shooting for, to just make sure we've got enough to represent an American single malt.
And it's finished in new and used oak and sherry barrels. Sherry barrels or sherry
butts?
Orlos or sherry butts. Like Butte, Montana, Butte, America.
And again, that really goes to a lot of what Reed did for us. So we use the new and used cooperage, and Reed came in and said, "Look, I know what you're trying to do. I know the flavor." We gave him a couple bottles of things we were trying to shoot for. He said, "I know what you're trying to do. You can't do it without finishing on some sherry." And so he wound up bringing in some Oloroso butts from Spain, and we do a 60-day finish. So these barrels have been sitting for 8 years. Then there's a blend. Then they go into the sherry butts. They sit for about 60 days, and then they go.
The blend goes in the sherry butt.
That's correct.
Oh, okay. All right.
See, I'm going to give you it right now. Your new motto: we have the butts in Butte. Boom.
Yeah. Well, we got a couple. We
put the butt in Butte.
So the one you really don't like is called Butte America. Butte America, it's a big damn deal, and that's the way we talk about it. So when you come out here, big butts and big damn deal.
I love the dried fruit and cocoa notes. Those are
Right on. Yeah. Thank you.
Some of that feels like candy, like a bit of honey kind of thing. Yeah. See,
we hear that a lot.
Old candy.
And that cocoa, it's the kind of the toasted coconut,
Thank you, guys. This is really great.
Really, there's a lot of fruit in that. I love that.
Yeah, the raisin, dried fruit.
Yeah, pumpkins, cardinals. I'm just looking at Liz's picture here.
Sorry. I don't know. It tastes like Lou's book. It tastes like magic. I don't know.
I'm picking up mustache. I don't know why. I'm picking up notes of mustache.
Yoga mat. What else?
Special K. Oh, that's my breakfast.
Well, I'll tell you,
I'll tell you what it tastes like. It tastes like this is my third pour. That's what the hell tastes like to me. So
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, too. This is my third as well.
And I think, again, it comes down to the best whiskey in the world is whiskey you like the best. And I think there's a lot of room between there for people who just want to try everything. And really, we are so grateful for anyone who gets a chance to try this and just see what Courtney and I imagined 8 years ago, what Johnny J helped me put together that first time in MSU, what Reed has now blended into something really magical. It's just, you can't say after 8 years that it was all you, and so there's so many people who made something out of this, and that's really sort of Butte's story too. I mean, so many people came to Butte and made something special here, and we would be nothing without lovely people like you guys saying nice things. So thank you.
Now, did you also mention yesterday that you're also working to get more minorities into distilling?
Yes.
So,
yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I know we've been sort of scattershot, and I really appreciate the time to be able to say something about this. So, Johnny J and I started this sort of private Facebook group a couple of years ago, so 5, 6, 7 years ago, called the Good Guy Distillers. And basically, we were just sick of not being able to find the right information. Like you go into forums at ADI, and it was just littered with crap, and we just couldn't. We needed people we really trusted and we could ask questions of and feel confident in the answers. And so we started this little private Facebook group called the Good Guy Distillers, and we just started inviting people, and we hold it to about 100. In fact, Friday night we purged, like we do our annual purge, and we purged about 30 or 40 people.
And I survived, so it's
and Liz is a member, so thank you, Liz. Liz has been a member for a long time. The reason we do this is because you have to participate. You have to share. You have to expand the knowledge set of the group as a whole. And there's amazing people in there. Liz is in there. Reed's in there. Todd Leopold's in there. I mean, just people who blow you away. Maggie Campbell, Nicole Austin. I mean, people just, they've forgotten more about making booze than you've ever learned. And so Paul Letko, I mean, the list goes on. And so what we decided to do here is that ACSA's diversity internship program called the Step Up program. They've fired it off, but it's a really rough year to get things going. And so what we elected to do, the good guys, is we have decided to come together. Randy Hudson out at 888, he's one of the good guys. He's actually going to fly out here to Montana. And a bunch of good guys are donating their malt to this project. And we're going to do a vatted malt whiskey here at our facility here. And a bunch of the good guys are offering PR services and bottles and labels, corks, whatever. And we're actually going to package this up and sell it. And all the proceeds that are going to come out of this are going to the ACSA Step Up Diversity Program. So we're hoping to raise about $50,000 for this really, really important program that we really care about. And this is sort of us leveraging our good. And so the joke about the purge earlier, it's not a joke. I mean, every year, Johnny J and I get together, we get drunk, and we get rid of people who never fucking participate. And it's the real thing about what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to care about each other. And we talked about this earlier in this podcast about collaborating. It's the best part about our industry. And when you find people who are willing to help and share their joy and share their knowledge, it just makes it such an easier thing to show up to work and get beat up by critics of your whiskey or people who don't, you have awful days. And what do you need? You need this support group of people who know what they're doing. And other days where you were just lost. You don't know the answer. And I know if I go into Good Guys and I say, I don't know what's going on, can you help me? Either Liz or Johnny J or Paul Letko or Randy Hudson, somebody is pinging in within an hour with the answer, not with, I think this might be it. I mean, they're literally pinging in with the answer and said, I'll call you in 10 minutes and we'll save that ferment. And we'll take care of this off flavor. It's amazing. And if you don't have that in an industry, I don't care what industry you're in, if you don't have that kind of group together, it's not great. So I want to add one thing, because Courtney says it better than I in like all of these times. And again, I'm just going to fuck it up. So just rely on me. But the Good Guys is really a space about professional vulnerability and amplifying our shared values. Like we need to show up and say, I don't know what's going on. Can you help me? And then we need to show up and say, hey, I'm there to help you whenever you need it. And if you don't have that, you're just cocked. I don't care what business you're in. So anyway, yes, thank you for bringing that up, Liz. And thank you for giving me a chance to share that. Is that the Good Guys have finally decided there's a way for us to leverage our good in a really impactful way, and you should be seeing something about our vatted whiskey sometime late spring, and all of the proceeds are going to go to ACSA's Step Up program.
Sweet, that's
Yes,
great.
I'm assuming we're still together. Then I'm sure we'd be happy to push that along as much as we can.
That's really lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. We would totally lean on you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, that might not happen. There's a lot of contracts we got to discuss.
Oh, yeah. Like this rights the whole night.
Liz is asking for an awful lot of cheese.
The negotiations are kind of rough right now. Yeah.
Liz, you should have your own little
We'll get there.
Ask the Distiller page where people just come to you and.
Actually, Liz just last issue wrote the Good Guys article for Artisan Spirits Magazine. So
very privileged
inside
to have...
Artisan Spirits Magazine, Good Guys has a issue-ly. I don't know if that's quarterly. I don't fuck with that. But anyway, every time one comes out, there's a space just for the Good Guys. And so Liz wrote the last. And the thing about writing one is that once you write one, you nominate someone else in the Good Guys to write the next one. And you nominated
Donald. I think Donald
Snyder?
Yeah.
Okay, you nominated Donald Snyder, right on. So be looking for another Good Guy article from him. So we literally put out our knowledge, not just in our private group, but also in these other forums where we can add value.
Because sharing is caring.
It is.
Yeah.
And now your cat is kind of like stealing the show today, man.
I know, it's just like starfish everywhere.
I'm not getting the best view. Not getting the best view at all.
Get in on that.
I know that's supposed to be a sign of trust, but frankly, don't trust me. Don't trust me. That's how you're going to show it. So now this is available. This is available here in Chicago. What about New York, Pennsylvania?
The Kelly. So right now the Kelly is only available in Montana and Chicago. Well, that's not true. It's also available in Washington State. But we've, like I said, the allocation of it has been. Just tell a story because I tell everything as a story. A couple of years ago, we sort of outran our own britches. Like we put out some bourbon that was too young, and it didn't. I was like, "Fuck it, just get it out. No one will notice." And of course, they fucking noticed. And so what we decided to do is we've learned from that, and the allocation of this product is set up to do what we want it to do. So right now, Chicago is a big market for us, which we're really grateful to Brian Sisk and the group out there. And then Montana. I mean, right now, I want everyone in Montana, when they ask for a single malt, I want them asking for the Kelly.
It makes sense, especially if you're in Butte.
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. I want to give Jameson a run for their money.
Do it. Those guys, they've been on top too long. It's about time you topple them. Hey, there's no age statement on this. Is that intentionally trying to get away from age statements?
Yes and no. I mean, the oldest juice in there is 8 years. The youngest juice is 4 years. And again, back to the standards of identity. Once you start, and then also the 60 days in sherry. Like once you start trying to put it all together, we didn't really feel like we could tell a good story that the consumer would just understand. So generally speaking, there's nothing younger than 4, but there's some 8-year-old juice in there. So, but we didn't do that because we didn't go out and say, all right, let's pull just the vintage that was 8 years and put them in, and not just vintage 7 years. But what we really did was let's go in and pull, and this is Reed's contribution really, was let's go in and pull the things that give the flavor we're looking for, and let's sort of hold it a standard. And the standard is don't go pull anything younger than 4 years.
Which also kind of goes with, Irish whiskey. I mean, I know the minimum is 3, but typically most Irish whiskey won't use anything less than 4.
Right. And I think little guys like us too. I mean, the fact that I could hold Courtney and I, could carry cash for 8 years before we could release it. Yeah. That's the other problem too with a lot of American single malts. It's just we're not poor, but fuck, we don't have a lot of money, and trying to carry that cash for that amount of time. I hope you're like logging how many F-bombs I've dropped because I've gotten better in the last 10 minutes. But trying to carry that cash for that long of time is really hard for little distilleries.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I certainly don't want to speak to carrying cash at Jameson. I'm sure it's just as hard to carry a couple $100 million a day, but we can't do that. And so if we can't do that, what was lucky about us, or not, just the way things worked out, is we could sit on it, we could wait, and we could use the revenues we made from selling stills, or the revenue that comes from the Orphan Girl, the bourbon cream liqueur, those sell so well that it gave us a chance to be patient and to try to get to a product that we felt like you guys wouldn't take a sip of and go, I gotta say something nice. I don't want to say. So luckily we were able to get you guys something that you genuinely seem to appreciate.
This is very easy drinking.
Yeah.
What's this retail for? Do you have any idea?
Low 40s.
Low 40. Yeah, see, that's very doable.
Chicago, I think Chicago might be 49. I think is what we're hoping for you to find on the shelf. But I mean, you'd have so little influence on the price downstream. But
hello, Chicago. Christmas is coming up.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
That's right.
Get in on this.
I go good with turkey. Yeah.
You guys,
Oh my God.
In Pennsylvania, I'm sorry.
Can you
The
imagine?
last thing you want is me endorsing your product in Pennsylvania.
If you were
well, I'll tell you, Lou, my father-in-law grew up in Pennsylvania, and his house was across the street from Pittsburgh's practice field. So as a kid, he was a water boy for the Distilleries.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So I'd like to get some booze back to Pennsylvania, but I haven't yet because, again, just we're a little guy. Like, how far?
I mean, that's the good thing about Pennsylvania, about the system, the same as in Washington. When you're in, you're everywhere.
You're in.
You have to sell it once. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So everybody, I highly recommend that you buy a bottle of Kelly, sit back, enjoy a good book, especially page 251, acknowledgements, that little paragraph right there, all about Marty Duffy.
I love it.
God almighty.
That's good reading. Oh my God. I could read that over and over.
You know, Liz is on page 250. So just saying.
Earlier.
Thanks, Lou.
Yeah, before you.
Were you doing it by height? Acknowledgements by height? That must be that's only explanation I got.
Is last. That's what.
Yeah. So, speaking of Dr. Don, did I just hear Dr. Don?
Dr. Don.
Here we go.
Next episode.
Dr. Howard, Dr. Don, Dr. Howard.
I don't know how we've never had that seamless of a segue. So thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, pretend it was delivered.
Looking ahead to next week, we have Dr. Don Livermore. So we'll be talking more about continuous systems, I'm sure. So
yeah, Canadian whiskey.
Yeah.
So, sweet.
So everyone,
the link is already up, actually. So you can go ahead and reserve your spot today.
You don't want to miss this one.
Yeah, don't miss Dr. Don. He's a really nice fella and very informative guy. Actually, I think distills a little. So we should talk to him. Everyone check out the link below about John and Courtney's distillery in beautiful Butte, America.
It really is a cool video.
They did a really great job telling our story.
I think the little Sip of Knowledge team has to make a road trip.
We'll be here
because I
might have to do that.
Gotta check Montana off my bucket list.
That's right.
But why don't we have a little sip since we have your whiskey here, a little toast.
A little cattail.
Here's to a little cattail.
Little starfish. Thank you. So it's my cheers because you guys invited me on. I just want to say thank you to you guys. It's really important that people are out there telling the story that the industry needs to hear, and I'm really grateful that you guys are telling that story. So thank you. Here's to you.
Oh, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cilantro, as they say.
Cheers. And
now what? Just awkward silence? Like, how do you guys take us?
Well, that was drinking. That was awkward drinking.
It was a drinking pause. John, Courtney, Reed, keep being awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, kids.
Cheers,
and John, enjoy your personalized glasses. Lou is going to send you over 50 signed copies of this book.
Right on.
For your
I wanted to write my name on page 62, like in the bottom of it, and John McKee.
Yeah, right next to me. Right next to me. Acknowledge.
Nice to Duffy.
All right, kids.
Amazing.
Thank you, John. Liz,
Everybody
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
John.
Cheers.